Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mitul, and I'm here to present around a move from traditional ops to SRE ops. Yeah, from H&M, and a little bit about me. I lead the capability of the practice around SRE, and taking it from traditional operations into integrated SRE ops. I've been in the industry for about 23 years, and my focus has been around SRE ops and DevOps. Yeah. Today, I will be talking around the traditional setup, how we were, what were the divergent goals between product, dev, the business versus IT conflict, and then how did our journey begin, right? With the proof of value. What did we do in that proof of value? What were the quick wins in terms of efficiency and effectiveness? And then, obviously, how did we scale our adoption from a maturity perspective, having governance guardrails, and what is our roadmap ahead and the way forward, and hopefully some question and answers. So essentially, this is the divergent goals. So we have a product organization. We are in a product-led organization. And typically in product organization, there is product innovation where the product team increasingly would like to build on new features and hand it over to operations and at a higher speed. And then on the operations side, we aim to keep the system reliable and stable all the time with the changing production landscape. And our focus obviously is on stability. In our case, it was a monolithic setup with quarterly releases, and it gradually moved to monthly. Now, with a monolithic landscape, and as we wanted to scale our digital setup, so this is essentially for the e-com setup of H&M, it became even more complex to run the operations, and it became unsustainable. With more changes, there were more errors, which resulted in more instability, and hence the higher cost of run. Yeah. So essentially, in modern product development is essentially distributed and with more functionality being introduced more frequently, creating more support activities. And because there were more support activities, there were a larger need for effort in those. And if it is not managed correctly, the increasing speed of change, there is greater asymmetry between the product and the operations side of it. Yeah. Now this is one lens through which there were divergent goals, and then there was the business and the IT side. Right now, with the traditional ops, obviously we had the operations team did not want further changes. They were reluctant to bring in new changes because they were more concerned about stability. Whereas the product team, as I said, wanted to roll out new changes at high speed. And then we have business on the other side in the digital landscape where they wanted both. They wanted reliability, they wanted new stuff at the same time. And that is where there was a conflict between business and IT. Yeah. And with this conflict, essentially, this is we started with a proof of value. Now, in our landscape, if we took essentially two brands, now H&M is a collection of multiple brands, as you might know. So we took two brands and two markets. We are in multiple markets today. We took a small subset, which covered about three product teams catering to these brands and markets. Dev to ops ratio was 3:1, which is very high. For each developer, there was an operations engineer supporting the product. Very high run cost, as you can see. Our tech landscape was microservices, Next.js, commerce platform, Kubernetes on Azure, and we had our Azure DevOps pipeline. So this is pretty much a modern tech stack in terms of microservices and Kubernetes. Double-digit monthly incidents as of now for the three products that were there. And there was unclear product maturity, yeah, around operational capability. So we were in a traditional setup. We did not know how mature we are on the operational side of it. And then there were multiple iterations with business on requirements, support, and stability. As I said earlier, we used to have multiple iterations with business demanding more stability due to campaigns running across these markets and new features to be launched to gather more traffic and hence more customers. Yeah. So what did we do? So we blocked a 16-week period which is about 4 months, we started by embedding an SRE in the product team. So we had 3 product teams. We embedded the SRE in those product teams. We built a capability framework or a maturity framework with 27 capabilities. So these capabilities, of course, obviously run across build to operate, and they were across people, process, and technology. Injecting SRE into the product team meant that the SRE was dedicated to the product team and was able to mature the operational side, working closely with the product team. Additionally, the product team was also given full accountability and responsibility from build to operate. So there was no kind of a wall in between. There was no handovers. The product team knew, or the developer knew, what is happening in production. On the process side, it was more around enabling postmortems and having stability metrics in place. Yeah. On the technology side, having an automation across the pipelines, infrastructure automation, operational excellence in terms of integrating incidents into in ServiceNow into our alerts in Splunk, and thereby having an automated on call. And with this, we then did an assessment. So, having this framework in place, or we did an assessment of these 3 products across observability, resilience, release, security, and operations. So, these were the streams that we looked at from a holistic view and identify some of the gaps, yeah, for these products. And each of these streams, once we identified the gaps, we went ahead and kind of patched them. For example, in observability, while we all know around SLI and SLO from a technical perspective, what we looked at SLI, SLO is from a functional perspective, which impacts the customer experience. Yeah. So we tied those SLI, SLOs to the functional flows. As a case in example, when there is a functional flow, or which is, say, add to cart in any shopping e-commerce platform, that is underneath connected to multiple endpoints and multiple microservices in terms of inventory, or it could be prices, or it could be promotion. So we connected that multiple flows, multiple endpoints into one SLI and SLO. Started to monitor that. We refined the logging standards. With these 3 products, there were different logging standards in terms of specific attributes that we needed to build these service levels. And hence we had this consolidated view around monitoring and then alerting. And then we build the pipelines. More importantly, the release, the quality and the security, as well as the change gates. The change gate essentially is, while we wanted compliance on ITSM in terms of change management, so we ensured that there's an automatic change gate in the pipeline, which ensures that any rollout that is happening is supported by a change request. Enabled release at will, and also integrated the testing part of it in terms of unit performance, regression, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And then resilience, in addition to the fallback and redundancy, from the code perspective, we actually refactored it to ensure circuit breakers, retries, and the caching mechanisms so as to improve the latency. Yeah. And of course, not to miss out on chaos, since we've been talking today so much around chaos, we implemented some of those measures using chaos engineering as well. And then on the security side, pen testing, pen test execution, security vulnerabilities, which were integrated again. And then operational excellence, as I mentioned earlier, alert to incident integration, operational KPIs in terms of MTTX, MTTR, MTTA, and then autonomy and accountability. So with this, the product team had an end-to-end accountability from build to operate, which means that whatever is there in production is the responsibility of the product team who's developed it. It is not a handover to another team that is there on the other side of the wall to take care of any changes that go into production. And with this 16-week period of 3 products in 2 markets, what we saw was great shift around efficiency and effectiveness. So one was product accountability. So product felt very high level of accountability, yeah, on not just what they build, but also what is there in production. They could see from the lens of the customer on what is the experience, and they were ready to be on call in case there were any P1 or P2s as well, along with the SRE. Yeah. And in this setup, we do not have any kind of ops as such, pure play traditional ops. Business IT alignment on stability. Now, when we built our functional flow SLIs and SLOs, the SLOs, that is the targets, were defined in alignment with the business, which means that when we look at, say, add to cart SLO, the business was aligned on what level of SLO in terms of availability for an add to cart functionality should be there at any point in time. Yeah. So, which means that if we are looking at a 95% SLO or a 99% SLO, it was aligned with business, it was aligned with the product team, and that is what we measured and we were alerted on. Greater than 80% operational maturity. So, what we achieved in this 4 months was that along those 27 capabilities, we managed to move the needle to the right around operational maturity of all those 27 capabilities. Of course, there were still gaps. However, majority of them were patched and we had implemented them to a great extent. Yeah. Observability tied to customer experience. So our observability was tied purely from what the customer experiences, and I'll talk a little bit more how we looked at it in some time. But the way we look at observability is not from a technical KPI perspective, is more from what the customer experiences on the website. Yeah. Each of our measures and measurements are tied purely to customer experience. Reduction in monthly incidents. Now, because we have full accountability by the product team, we had the SREs embedded in the product team, a high level of maturity. Our incidents automatically came down from a double to a single digit. Not that we had zero incidents, but yes, we had single digit incidents, but they were fairly low. Yeah. And then integrated the setup, build to operate. So with this integrated setup, we got cost efficiencies as well, where we had a dedicated operations team and a dedicated development team. With this integrated, we had a build to ops integration with high level of cost efficiencies. Frequent releases. So we went from monthly to thrice a week during that 4 month period, and later on at the lager end at will. So we moved to anytime we want to release with compliance to change management around ITSM, because there was a change gate. So we had compliance to ITSM standards as well. And last but not the least, optimized run cost to one SRE per product team. As I said, the run costs as the tech landscape increases or it expands, the more complex it gets to operate that landscape in terms of stability, reliability, and maintaining that over a longer period of time. Yeah. So we had one SRE. When I said one SRE, it means that even the product team was able to contribute to run. Yeah. So because we had an integrated setup. Now that was for the POV and the delivery and the outcome. What did we change after that in the longer so as to sustain this and to amplify this across the organization? Yeah. H&M, a large organization. This was the view that we saw earlier in the beginning. Yeah. So in any e-com landscape, there are layers. For example, there's an experience layer, there's a components, data, and a platform layer, and you have dedicated teams in many cases for those. And each of those teams are looking at stability from their perspective. So someone sitting on the platform side will look at the infra side. What is the stability I'm delivering? Similarly, on the data side, yeah, if you have an AIAD kind of a setup, or the experience on the front end side, yeah. So if there is a front end team who's looking at purely the front end, and however, there's a customer at the top, which really is either visiting or browsing the website, or is a member who wants to look at and buy products, or someone who's actually doing the purchase, yeah. And what the business is looking at is really the customer. Business doesn't care what stability I have on which layer, yeah, whether it is a platform that is working great or the experience that is working not so great, yeah. And that is where, and that's what we found, that no one is looking across the layers, yeah, in terms of stability, in terms of reliability. And that is where we transformed our entire setup into value streams. Yeah. So we have value streams, which are a combination of customer flows and products. In each value stream, we have business, we have development, we have testing, and we have an SRE. So an SRE, it could be an embedded SRE or a shared SRE, and I'll talk more around that. What is the difference between both, and in what cases we have both. And then on the bottommost, we have the governance around the capability on, so that we have consistent practices being followed across. So moving from an approach where, or the model where we looked at stability horizontally, we wanted to have a setup where we look at stability vertically from a customer lens, yeah, and have a perfect alignment with business as well within those product teams and the value stream, yeah. And this is where how SRE actually did the maturity and the engagement model. Each of our products has a business criticality based whether it is a critical product or a non-critical product. And based on the maturity assessment, uh, it is either in one of those states, baseline, intermediate, or expert. And the engagement level is defined by that. So if there is a critical product, which is highly business critical, let's say payment, yeah. In any e-com landscape, payment would be highly critical because the customer, we at the end of the day, is going to pay for the product. So that particular service or product would be highly critical. Now, obviously, in that product, if the maturity moves at a higher level, we could make it a shared SRE, thereby spreading the SRE across the board and ensuring that we can make more of the existing workforce that we have, as well as ensuring that the product teams shoulder the responsibility around running their products in production as well. So as the product matures, the SRE embedded in the product is spread across value streams, and maturity level is defined or derived by the SRE assessment. Yeah. How do we govern all of this? Yeah. While we have spread this out after the POs, so we did a POV, we got the outcome, and then we tweak the model. We have an engagement model, but how do we govern all of that? Yeah. And that is where we came with a RACI. Yeah. So we have a RACI, which is a responsibility matrix for between the product and the SRE. Production stability is a joint responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the SRE. It is not the responsibility of any kind of ops. It is a joint responsibility of the value stream of the product and the SRE that is embedded in the product or shared in the product. Measurements, as I said, defined service levels aligned to business. So we have the functional flows where we define the service levels. Assessment, we do it on a quarterly basis, and basis the assessment outcome, we define where the product is and how open that product is to release at what speed. It could be released at will, it could be, or there could be certain guardrails in place depending on the maturity. So lower the maturity, tighter the guardrails. Higher the maturity, they are able to roll out more often. As I said, guardrails are tied to operational maturity. Higher the maturity, lower the incidents and frequent changes. So as we saw, higher the product went on SRE maturity, lower the incidents and more frequent changes. Process compliance to change problems and incident process. So we ensured while we wanted to go at speed, we wanted to maintain stability. However, we wanted to also maintain compliance to the ITSM standards in terms of change, problem, and incident. And then what is the way forward? Yeah. Currently, SRE adoption for all applicable products. So in the digital landscape, we are doing SRE adoption across the landscape for all the applicable products. Continuously optimizing SRE engagement based on maturity. So, higher the maturity, we spread the SREs across the landscape so as to optimize on that capacity. It's not one SRE per product, otherwise, it would be again the same old story around a run or the traditional ops. And then starting next year, we plan to, while we had the service levels tied to functional flows, now what we want to do is tie the service levels to business KPIs. So business also has certain KPIs or measurements, and we want to tie each of those service levels that we have derived to the business KPIs so that there is a direct correlation and direct impact on what we are measured on. Yeah. And then a gradual move towards predictive ops, which is AI ops. So this is where we are moving slowly and gradually, where we want to go towards self healing and predictive outcomes. Thank you.